Bargel. I'm a member of the Australian Palestinian community and I'm honoured to be your MC for this evening. Would you kindly pause for the Australian and Palestinian national anthems? Acknowledge the Aboriginal nations as the first people of Australia and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, thanking them for their custodianship of this land. The Australian Palestinian community of New South Wales wishes to welcome our distinguished guests. The Honourable Trevor Khan, representing the Government of New South Wales, and the Honourable Luke Foley, the Leader of the New South Wales Opposition. The Honourable Members of Federal Parliament, Anthony Albanese, Chris Hayes, Deborah O'Neill and Lee Rhiannon. The Honourable Members of New South Wales Parliament, Julia Finn, Hugh McDermott, Shaukat Mosulmani, Walter Secord, David Shoebridge, Linda Volz and Ernest Wong. Your Excellencies, Arab Ambassadors to Australia, bear with me on this one. Azad Abdul Hadi, State of Palestine. Najib Al-Badel, State of Kuwait. Nasser bin Hamad Al Khalifa, State of Qatar. Nabil Al-Saleh, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And Mohammed Khaled, Arab Republic of Egypt. And Karim Medrik, the Kingdom of Morocco. Your Excellencies, Arab Consul Generals and Consuls, we also received many apologies from federal and state parliamentarians and Arab diplomats. Australian Labor Party Headquarters, Mark Lennon, President, New South Wales Labor. Kyla Merman, General Secretary, New South Wales Labor. Patrick Garcia, Assistant Secretary, New South Wales Labor. Representatives of the Trade Union Movement, Bernie Farrelly, Secretary of Maritime Unions Australia. Mark Murray, Secretary of Unions Australia. Tara Moriarty, Secretary of the United Voice Liquor and Hospitality Division. Your Eminencies, religious leaders of all faiths, distinguished academics, members of the media and representatives of solidarity organisations, representatives of the Australian Arab and ethnic communities, sisters and brothers of the Australian Palestinian community. I must first convey to you the sincere apologies of Dr. Nabil Shah, Commissioner of International Relations and Foreign Minister of Palestine, who is keen to be with us here tonight but was unable to attend at the last minute due to unforeseen circumstances in Palestine. He has, however, sent us a video message on this occasion that we will share with you later. Distinguished guests, the Australian Palestinian community is privileged to host this event in celebration of the Palestine National Day. This is an occasion that is very dear to our hearts as we celebrate and advocate for the establishment on the ground of the independent and sovereign state of Palestine. At present, some 140 nations of the world recognise the state of Palestine, which is now an observer member of the United Nations. It is with great eagerness that we anticipate in the near future that Palestine will be recognised as a full member of the United Nations. It is with a heavy heart that we note, as loyal Australians of any background, that our successive governments are yet to recognise Palestine in accordance with international law, which Australia has always prided itself of adhering to. This indeed is very disheartening. However, I shall leave the politics of the issue to our speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege to invite the Honourable Trevor Khan, Deputy President of the Legislative Council, representing the Government of New South Wales, to the lectern.
Ladies and gentlemen, could I first acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet and pay my respects to the elders past and present. There are clearly too many dignitaries here to acknowledge, so I acknowledge you all. I accept the friendship that has been shown by so many of you. I acknowledge the members of the Consular Corps, the community and religious leaders, dear friends. Can I start by returning to the acknowledgement to country? The acknowledgement to country is not a mere form of words. It is an opportunity to acknowledge history, because in an acknowledgement of the wrongs of the past, to acknowledge history is to begin the path to reconciliation and to begin the path to righting the wrongs that are not only in the past but also continue on to this very day. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be here this evening as the New South Wales Government's representative sharing this celebration. I thank you for the invitation and the chance to say what will only be a few words. In New South Wales, the Australian Palestinian community are growing steadily and increasingly contributing to the multicultural nature of our state of New South Wales and our community. Census data shows that from 2006 to 2011, there have been almost a 20% increase in the number of people with Palestinian ancestry living here. We have one of the most vibrant and diverse multicultural societies in the world here in New South Wales. At the last ABS census statistics, the citizens of New South Wales were born from more than 225 different places on this planet. We spoke over 200 languages and practiced more than 100 religions. The harmony in which such a diverse group of people live together is something that we all should be particularly proud of. It's something that we must be prepared to go to extraordinary lengths to nurture and celebrate. It's undoubtedly one of our greatest strengths, but in reality, it's also one of our greatest challenges. Ladies and gentlemen, the Australian Palestinian community is very well integrated into our society, as you all well know. There are a number of Palestinian clubs and associations which preserve your heritage and support and promote the integration of the Palestinian community into Australia. Helping newly arrived migrants settle and to address the everyday issues of employment, housing, education and access to government services. Today's gathering shows your community's pride in its history and its commitment to make a positive contribution in our state. There is a commitment from this government and from, I believe, all members of Parliament that are here tonight to understanding the challenges that face the Palestinian community, and as the Premier has said when he recently visited the Palestinian territories, as the first sitting Premier to do so. We strongly believe that by sharing ideas and experiences, we are better able to market our cultural diversity, generate new business relationships and build a stronger economy together. So once again, thank you for your friendship, thank you for your invitation and for the chance to be part of your celebration here tonight.
I am now privileged to invite the Honourable Luke Foley, MP, Leader of the Opposition of New South Wales, to the podium.
Well, thank you. Could I also acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and pay respect to elders past and present? Could I particularly acknowledge the presence of His Excellency Izzat Abdul Hadi, the Ambassador of the State of Palestine? Thank him very much for inviting me to be here with the Palestinian community tonight. This is a terrific development. For many years, we've celebrated Palestinian National Day in the New South Wales Parliament, and indeed we had an event last week, yet again. But for the community to do this at such a grand venue, I think is a terrific development, and I look forward to attending this function in these palatial surroundings for many years to come. Friends, I was in Lebanon earlier this year with Shaket Musulmani, with Jihad Dib, Julia Finn, parliamentary colleagues, all of whom are here tonight. And we attended the dawn service at the Commonwealth War Cemetery in Beirut on Anzac Day. A stunning, well-maintained war cemetery in Beirut, and it, of course, is next to the Shatila refugee camp, where, of course, the tragedy of 1982 will never be forgotten. But for us, on that very solemn day for Australians at the Anzac Day dawn service in Beirut, we couldn't help but be struck by the plight of the Palestinian people. I think there's around 500,000 in Lebanon, been there for decades, but the Shatila refugee camp next to this beautiful, immaculately maintained Commonwealth War Cemetery. And we went to El Minya, many people from El Minya in my part of Sydney, a number of them here tonight, and the community presented me with a Palestinian scarf. The Mayor of El Minya, the community leaders, the local Member of Parliament from the Future Movement, large reception for our Australian Labor Party delegation. The present they gave me, they honoured me with, was a Palestinian scarf. And I'm proud to say in my electorate of Auburn, at the Granville South High, I was there with Laurie Ferguson just a few weeks ago celebrating the school's 50th year. There's that garden that was planted to commemorate the Nakba that's maintained to this day by the Palestinian community of the western suburbs of Sydney. There's not a lot we can do about international relations from a provincial parliament in Australia, from a state parliament. But when I became Labor leader, I thought, what can I do at the level of state politics to stand with the Palestinian people? So I'm proud to say that I was the first party leader in Australia to adopt a policy for all of my members of Parliament that any MP who takes a study trip to Israel must spend an equivalent period of time, an equivalent number of days in Palestine with the Palestinian people, seeing what they're experiencing. And it won't change the world, it won't change perhaps the harsh and intolerable policies of a right-wing Israeli government right now. But it's a statement, and I'm pleased to say that other leaders are adopting it. I was talking to Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk of Queensland. She's now adopted the same policy. Not a week in Israel and 2 hours in Palestine. Equal time, seeing what the Palestinian people experience in their lives in Palestine. I think members of parliament who do that, I encourage them to travel to the Middle East. I don't have a problem with members of parliament going to Israel, but I say you must. I insist that you spend equal time in Palestine talking to the Palestinian leadership and talking to the Palestinian people to get their perspective on what is happening. I can only wish the Palestinian community here in Australia and obviously in Palestine my best wishes, my solidarity. I'll be travelling to Ireland for Christmas. My wife hails from there, from the north of Ireland, and I'm proud to say that when we visit her homeland, the Palestinian flags will be flying on the streets of Belfast as they always do, as a reminder of the struggles. It's a reminder of the struggles that people have engaged in around the world for their right to self-determination and freedom and peace with justice. And when I see that at Christmas, the Palestinian flags flying in Belfast, where it'll probably be snowing, I'll think of you, the great Palestinian community in New South Wales. Thanks for having me. Have a great night.
I am honoured to invite His Excellency Izzat Abdul Hadi, Ambassador of the State of Palestine, Head of the General Delegation of Palestine to Australia, New Zealand and the Pacific, to address us.
Let me seize this opportunity to recognize and appreciate the presence of a lot of dignitaries here, which has been mentioned by the MC. But of course, I'd like to recognize and appreciate the presence of the federal parliamentarians, members of the state parliament, my colleagues and friends, the excellencies of Arab states. They were all the time very supportive and still supportive to us in the Council of Arab Ambassadors. Thank you very much for coming. And I'd like also to thank the faith-based representatives here, and of course, the representative of the New South Wales government and the leader of the opposition. Thank you very much for your kind words and your work for Palestine. Thank you. And also, I'd like really to recognize the presence of Bishop Georgie Browning, the president of Australian Palestinian Advocacy Network, for their impressive work for Palestine. Thank you very much for coming. Good evening, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to be with you tonight to celebrate the Palestinian National Day. I'd like to thank the Australian Palestinian community of New South Wales for doing a fantastic job in organizing the observation of this important day, with special thanks going to Edi Zananiri and Hassan Musa. This event would not have been possible without your hard work and dedication. Renowned Palestinian poet Mahmoud Darwish once said that, without hope, we are lost. Darwish was also the author of the Palestinian Declaration of Independence, which was proclaimed by the late President of the State of Palestine, Yasser Arafat, on 15 November 1988. The Palestinian National Day is an opportunity for us to come together to celebrate the great achievements of the Palestinian people, who have progressed from dispositions to steadfastness and resistance through state building, from being wiped off the map to becoming a widely recognized international actor. These achievements have been made in the face of a great adversity, as I am sure many of you are actually aware. We have had to overcome huge obstacles to peace. The illegal Israeli settlements projects has continued, relentless, occurring alongside the demolition of Palestinian homes physical and verbal abuse, the detention of Palestinian children, and the confiscation of Palestinian land, water, and other vital resources. These human rights violations form part of a wider project of forcing Palestinians farther out of their homeland in a process that can only be described as ethnic cleansing. In blatant violation of Fourth Geneva Convention, international humanitarian law, and international humanitarian rights law, the Palestinian people have been able to overcome the fragmented existence that the occupation has created for them by uniting around their shared identity. This was visibly demonstrated during the First Intifada, where Palestinians found hope and joined hands in resisting the oppression of the occupation. This collective movement has since transformed into an approach of steadfastness and nonviolent resistance, working alongside the political strategies of state building and internationalization to create a brighter future for Palestinians. This has seen the development of transparent, accountable institutions that provide quality services to the Palestinian people through the implementation of effective public works programs. Also, Palestine has asserted itself as a legitimate international actor, being recognized as a state by the United Nations and over 138 countries, and signing the ICC's Rome Statute, among countless other achievements. Such achievements have likewise been reflected in the developing relationship between Palestine and Australia. Australia aid to Palestine has reached 42.8 million annually, primarily supporting agriculture development, education, state building, and health services. On the political level, Australia Foreign Minister Julie Bishop visited Palestine in September this year and conducted fruitful discussions with both the Palestinian leadership and the Minister of Economy, where it was agreed that trade relations and economic cooperation should increase between Palestine and Australia. Also, the official positions on Palestine of the Australia political parties have developed significantly in recent years. I'd like to thank very much the Labour Party for adopting different policies in their own National Congress conference last year, 2015, on July, about Palestine, in which they considered the settlements as illegal by international law, and they stated that they will, in consultation with like-minded organizations, if they win the election, to recognize the state of Palestine. So thank you also to the Labour Party. The Australian public are likewise increasingly supportive of Palestinian cause, with 64% of Australians condemning the building of illegal Israeli settlements on Palestinian land. So there is a gap between the position of the government and the position of the public in Australia. These positive trends reflect the amazing advocacy work that is being conducted here in Australia, promoting the rights of the Palestinian people. I am extremely proud of the Palestinian community for their involvement in the advocacy and lobbying processes. We must continue to work together as Palestinians, further uniting and organizing ourselves as a community to present powerful, unified voice in advocating for the rights of the Palestinian people. We must celebrate and unite around the hope that past achievements can give us, working together to guarantee future achievements, ensuring the liberation of the Palestinian people on our land. As, to again quote Mahmoud Darwish, we have on this land all of that which makes life worth living. Thank you, everyone, and I hope that you enjoy this wonderful evening.
Just before moving on, I must also welcome Jihad Dib and thank him for his attendance. Distinguished guests, it is my pleasure to present to you Dr. Schatz's address to us on this occasion.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it gives me a great pleasure to address you in Australia. And I must express real sorrow I was not there with you to address you face to face, to talk to you, to engage in a discussion that I've kept with Australian friends over a long period of time. My first visit to Australia was in 1989, and I visited Australia 2 or 3 times after that, basically as the Minister for International Cooperation, which was the pseudonym for Minister of Foreign Affairs at the time, when we signed the Oslo Peace Agreement in Washington in 1994 and started the Palestinian Authority with the great hope that this signature, this peace accord, would deliver in 3 years a permanent settlement and in 5 years an independent Palestinian state on the borders of 1967 with East Jerusalem, the capital of that independent Palestinian state. There was a lot of hope in the early 90s that peace is coming, and peace in the Holy Land must carry with it a great importance, not only to Palestinians and Israelis, but to everybody in the world. It was the kind of peace that fit belief in God. Whether you're a Christian, a Jew, or a Muslim, it was the Holy Land. And peace in the Holy Land was extremely important. Unfortunately, this peace did not work out. We are still fully occupied by the Israeli army. We are fully controlled by the Israeli army. The Israelis withdrew unilaterally from Gaza and encircled Gaza and bombarded Gaza 3 times in the last few years, 2008, 2009, 2012, and 2014, and destroyed most of its houses and infrastructure, and encircled it and separated it totally from the West Bank. In the West Bank, there is nothing but a colonial settlement project that is proceeding with impunity to take over most of the land in the West Bank. When we signed the Oslo Accords in Washington in 1994, there was 160,000 Israeli colonial settlers in the West Bank and Gaza. Today, there are close to 700,000 colonial settlers. That is, in 24 years, instead of ending the colonial settlement program and ending the Israeli occupation of the West Bank and Gaza, instead, the number of colonial settlers have quadrupled, in fact. And today, 62% of the area of the West Bank, labeled Area C in the agreements, which should have been totally evacuated in 3 years after the signature of Oslo. This agreement has not been fulfilled, and the 62% Area C is today inhabited by 400,000 Israeli colonial settlers and 100,000 Palestinians. So in effect, in 2/3 of the West Bank, there is now an Israeli colony, which really covers all the agricultural land of the West Bank, all the water resources of the West Bank. Palestinians in the West Bank today are simply in cities and towns and big villages. They're not anywhere where they can really develop their agriculture or make use of their water resources. In fact, if you look at the statistics, 92% of the water resources of the West Bank are taken over and used by the colonial settlers, the 700,000 colonial settlers, and 8% of our water is used by 4.5 million Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza. What has really emerged out of the Oslo Agreement is catastrophic in more ways than one. Today, the speed with which the Palestinian East Jerusalem has been taken over by the Israelis, where the Palestinians are considered residents of East Jerusalem rather than citizens of their own birthplace in their own town and country. They are harassed everywhere. If they leave for a few years and come back, they lose their right to reside in their own hometown and the hometown of their grandfathers and ancestors. So what really is the status quo today is totally unsatisfactory and does not really fulfill any of the commitments that the Israelis have signed for back in 1994. That is not to say that there was no achievements whatsoever. No, between 1994 and 1996, during the administration of the late Prime Minister Rabin and then Mr. Peres, there was some progress. About 200,000 Palestinians came back into the West Bank and Gaza from the Palestinian diaspora all around the world. There was a Palestinian Authority established. The Israelis withdrew from major cities and towns in the West Bank and Gaza, starting with Gaza and Jericho, and then extending to Nablus and Hebron and Tulkarem and other places, excluding East Jerusalem, of course. And as a result, a government was established, administration was established, institutions of a future state were being established. In a year's time, we went into elections. Full democracy was established by legislative elections and presidential elections and a constitution and unification of laws, establishment of schools. We built in the first 5 years 150 schools a year, i.e. on the average of building a school every 2 days, in order to make up for the grave loss of schools during the Israeli occupation. We built hospitals, we built universities. There was only one university when we came in. We built 9 universities, and today there are 45 universities level colleges in the West Bank and Gaza. We built industrial zones, we built an airport in Gaza, and we were building a harbor in Gaza. Most of this, unfortunately, was destroyed later by the Israeli occupation. And a lot of the fruits of peace that we bargained for and we are willing to make a major concession for, and that is to only get back 22% of Palestine, which is the West Bank and Gaza, and establish a state on that 22%. Today, that 22% is still fully occupied by the Israelis. And our quest for sovereignty, for independence, for real peace based on cooperation between the Palestinians and the Israelis, creating a democratic, tolerant, secular society has really been vitiated by the continued colonial settlement and occupation of the Israeli forces of the West Bank. However, we have not given up, and we're still trying to pursue negotiations. Lately, it was the French who came up with a French initiative setting up an international arena for selecting a negotiating group that will sit down with the Israelis and Palestinians to start once again negotiating, starting from the agreements that we've signed and from international legitimacy and international resolutions, and an attempt to really revive the peace process. But so far, I cannot really report much progress on that question. The world is changing. Global power is changing. The United States is not today the only owner of the universe. The world is moving into a multipolar world. But the rules of the game have not been set yet. And that might explain something like Brexit and something like other changes that are difficult to understand, except with the changing power relationships and power alliances in the world. The destruction of Syria and the millions of refugees and the growth of terrorism and all of that are partly explained by this change in the world, but also partly explained by the continued non-solution of the Palestinian problem. There has to be a solution, and I do not see any solution that is possible and implementable other than a two-state solution. We once opted for a one democratic secular state for all the Jews, Christians, and Muslims of Palestine and Israel to live in a country where church is separated from state, in which democracy rules the political life and tolerance rules the religious and social life. But the Israelis will not take that. And that's why we had to go to a two-state solution. And I don't see any other solution today. We are not going anywhere. We Palestinians are in our homeland, and we will remain in our homeland. And the Israelis are there to stay. Therefore, there are two peoples who have to be accommodated, and the idea of two states in peace and security side by side is the only viable, the only achievable solution of the problem, and we are all for it up till this minute. We have our own problems. We have to achieve our own internal unity. We have to rebuild our own democracy. And may I tell you that the reason I'm not in Australia is I am one of those planning for the National Congress of Fatah to be held here in Ramallah on the 29th of this month, November. It's the first time we have a Congress since 2009, that is in 7 years. And therefore, our full return to democracy within the major political party, secular democratic political party, Fatah, is also a beginning of national elections for a legislative council and for a president. Therefore, reviving democracy is something we are going to build. Reviving our economy, make it more self-sustainable is part of our goals. Extending our relationship to the rest of the world, seeking support for a peaceful process that has been really very difficult to achieve so far, to end the Israeli occupation, to end the colonial settlement program, and build a democratic, secular society that is prosperous and peaceful and secure in Palestine. And therefore, I'd like to conclude by saying that we look to Australia for support. When I first came to Australia, I was really quite happy to meet with Australians, to see the change of Australia into a rainbow society, to see Australia opening to the world despite all the physical distance that separated us from Australia. Australia was represented in the Palestinian Authority, and the Australian people and government and NGOs contributed to important projects in Palestine, helping to establish the institutions of the coming Palestinian state in peace with Israel. I had a chance to meet with the Australian Jewish community at the time, and I had a chance to meet with everybody, really, that was willing to see me, and including the foreign minister at the time, Mr. Gareth Evans, who became quite a good friend, many others in your parliament. But you are too far away. I mean, it was very difficult for me to continue my trips to Australia, and I really wanted very much to have come this time, had it not been for the Congress that I am part of its organizing committees. We look to Australia to help in bringing back a peace process, in supporting the rights of the Palestinian people, in supporting the creation of an independent Palestinian state that is secular, democratic, progressive, in peace with its neighbor, to end the conflict and bring real peace to the Middle East is something I know would be part of the objectives of Australians, even though they are so far away. I promise to come the next time I have an opportunity to come to Australia. I like your country very much. I like Sydney in particular. I've been to Melbourne and to Canberra, of course, and Brisbane, many other places, and I wish Australia prosperity and peace and security and progress in the future. And I still hope that Australia will be a partner for the Palestinian people, supporting their rights and supporting any action that would bring real peace and progress in the Palestinian-Israeli context, and a real independent Palestinian state that contributes to world peace and justice. Thank you very much.
It is my pleasure to invite Mr. Eddie Zanamiri, Coordinator of the Australian Palestinian Associations of New South Wales, to present the community address.
Distinguished guests, allow me not to go through acknowledgements that have been made by others, just in the interest of saving time. I'm not going to make a long-winded speech, but I would like to address one or two points on behalf of the Australian Palestinian community. Thank the universe, I'm into politics, but not into diplomacy. So I'll try to put it as plainly as possible. There is a sense of urgency, my friends, in trying to deal with the current situation in Palestine, Israel, and in the Middle East. We are all aware of the so-called peace process that started with the Oslo Accord. Everybody speaks of 23 years of wasted negotiations with terrible results. And much of the world does not believe that a two-state solution is possible. Yet the Palestinian people persist. But my point is not this. My point is that the peace process, as a 23-year-old starting in 93, is a total fallacy for those who know politics and who have had the personal experience of accompanying facts. Actually, the peace process started in 1974. That's more like 46 years, not 23 years. It was in 1974, after the so-called October War of 1973, that Arafat attended the United Nations General Assembly and made his famous speech, for those of you who would remember, talking about carrying the olive branch in one hand and the gun of a revolutionary in the right hand, and asking the world not to force him to drop the olive branch. Now, that was not empty symbolism. That was a political message. And it actually launched dialogue between PLO and the main benefactor of Israel, namely the United States, on the future of Palestine and the future of the Middle East. And it was because of this dialogue that in 1975, PLO was instrumental in helping the United States evacuate its citizens from Beirut during the Lebanese Civil War. But it was also this particular engagement between PLO and the United States of America that rang alarm bells in Israel. The last thing Israel wanted for a Palestinian-American dialogue, followed by PLO-Westin dialogue. And hence, for those who believe in conspiracy theories like I do, hence there was the Lebanese Civil War. It was supposed to divert attention from the Palestinian cause and actually break the wings of PLO. But that didn't work. And hence, as a result of that, there was the 1978 Israeli incursion in Lebanon. And that, in turn, was supposed to tame the PLO and bring down its representation of the Palestinian people. That was the crux of the matter, because if you bring down the PLO representation, then there is no point in the dialogue between the Palestinians and the Americans. And when that did not work, there was a total invasion in 1982, which actually ended up in the dislodgement of PLO largely from Lebanon and a banished resistance in Tunisia. But that was not the end of the struggle. You might remember that also in 1974, that speech was a hint to the world that we are willing to compromise. That was accompanied by a very diplomatic murmur that we are willing to compromise with Israel and that we are willing to build a Palestinian state on territories that Israel will withdraw from. Of course, just like what Dr. Shas had spoken of, which would have been a beautiful dream for me to establish a democratic, secular state in Palestine for everybody to enjoy. But falling short of that, then the idea is to have a Palestinian state alongside Israel. So it did not start with the Oslo Accord. It started in 1974. In 1984, there was another more than hint. There was an official resolution by the PLO that the PLO is willing to establish a Palestinian state, let me quote, on territories that Israel will withdraw from. There couldn't have been a clearer form of statement, political statement of intent. And then in 1988, there was the declaration of the independence of Palestine in Algeria during a session of the Palestine National Council, which was the Palestinian parliament in exile. So all of these things were precursors to the Madrid Conference in 1991, post-Iraq invasion, and the Oslo Accord. And hence, it wasn't surprising that 23 years of negotiations on the premise of Oslo Accord led nowhere. It just brings us back to the old saying, political solutions are a reflection of the balance of power. And as long as Israel has got the upper hand, through the support of particularly the United States, political, economic, military, you name it, then there's no reason why the Israelis should compromise. That's a fact of life. And the Palestinians can scream their heads off as far as they want, and they won't see an inch of independent Palestinian territory in the current formula. Let's face the fact. Hence, what do? There had been a diplomatic onslaught by PLO and the Palestinian Authority. It had achieved tremendous gains, like, among other things, the recognition of some 140 nations of the State of Palestine, and the admission of the State of Palestine as a non-permanent observer state in the United Nations. But I think while all that is good, and I take some cues from Dr. Shas, while all that is great, it doesn't change anything on the ground. It doesn't change anything. And I would like to remind you of history. It was between 1948 and 1965 that the United Nations had made many resolutions on the Palestinian cause, none of which saw the light of day. None of them saw the light of day. And it was in tremendous despair that finally in 1965, the Palestinians took up arms and decided to wage armed struggle. Early in the game, they were condemned by the US and Westin. A bit later, the West recognized that the Palestinians had legitimate demands and they were right to struggle. And gradually that evolved into a political solution. You don't fight for the sake of fighting. You fight for the sake of a political solution. And everybody recognizes that. And that's what the Palestinians. Hence came the following steps in 1974, 1978, 1984, 1988, 1991, the Madrid Conference, and 1993, the Oslo Conference. But none of it has brought any results. And none of it is likely to bring any results. The two-state solution, despite some optimism and despite our insistence upon a two-state solution, if it is at all possible, is not likely to happen. So where do we go? Depending on international legitimacy, there are a handful of countries who have deprived us of the use of international law to have a just peace between Palestine and Israel. And let me emphasize the word just. We are not speaking about pacification, because all attempts so far have been to pacify the Palestinians. Pacification is very different from peace. Peace is directly related to justice. The only thing that can do that is if the international community pulls up its sleeves and tells Israel, enough is enough. You've got to sit at the table and have a serious negotiation, irrespective of the perceived balance of power. Because balances of power, historically, my friends, can change very quickly. It can. We've studied history, all of us, and we know balance of power can change. We don't want to talk about that. But that is the only light of hope that we can achieve peacefully a two-state solution that is just and acceptable to both parties. Without this, nothing is going to happen. Which brings me to my being a proud Australian citizen and a proud Australian citizen of Palestinian descent. As an Australian citizen, my friends, I'm proud of Australia's history as a country that had served peacekeeping in many parts of the world. I'm proud that Australia had done its best to adhere by international law, except when it comes to Palestine. My friends, there's tremendous hypocrisy in our political system when it comes to the question of Palestine. And as an Australian Palestinian, I'm deeply hurt by this state of affairs. Because while we all talk about discrimination and racism in society, whether in terms of hijab or what school to go to, all of this are objective indication of racism. But I want to bring to your attention a very major issue of racism. The actual discrimination by our political system against the Palestinian cause. It is nothing short of discrimination against the Palestinians. And this needs to change. And hence, I'm here to announce that the Palestinian Australian community, alongside the Australian Arab community, is going to take this issue very seriously. And it is going to engage extremely seriously and very positively, with the best of intentions, with our political system to achieve this end, which is having the Australian political system adhere to international law as Australia had always adhered to in relation to other causes. In the end, my friends, I wish to thank you all for sharing this evening with us. You made our hearts sing. I thank each and every one of you. I would also like to thank all those who have contributed to the success of this event. And in particular, I would like to thank my friend Hassan Musa, whose contribution and whose support there is has been instrumental in making this function a success. I would, yes. I would also like to thank Rose Elayan, the warrior in the dark, sitting in the corner, controlling the computer, responsible for the show and all the work, good work. Thank you, Rose. And of course, thank you, Marianne, for doing a tremendous job in welcoming our guests. Thank you all.
I would like to thank you all for sharing with us this auspicious occasion. We look forward to seeing you all on future occasions. I'd love to get, we'd love to get all of the Arab ambassadors to come to the stage to get a group photo. Otherwise, have a wonderful night. And the MPs would be wonderful.